Good afternoon, everyone, from Dunrovin Ranch in Lolo, Montana. It's spitting snow out there, but I am delighted to have some great guests for this afternoon session. With us today, we have Mark Beal, who is a Natural Resource Program Manager from Glacier National Park, his lovely wife, Alice, and his great assistant at Glacier National Park, Gracie. Welcome, Mark and Alice.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Can we see Gracie?
Yeah, we're going to. Come here. Come on up. Here. Come here. She's being reluctant to get on the chair, but we're getting there. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So this is a most unusual gig you've got going in Glacier National Park, Mark. And I can't imagine that it came together without you having been a prized employee. That I can't imagine the supervisor having, some employee roll in and say, gee, I'd like to, make my dog into an assistant. So could you first give us a little bit of your background with the Glacier National Park and the Park Service, and what exactly is a Natural Resource Program Manager? Could you?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great. Background on me, I've been with the Park Service now. It will be 28 years this November. So time flies when you're having fun. And I've been with Glacier National Park now for 10 years. Other parks I have worked in include Yellowstone, Bryce Canyon National Park, and then Padre Island National Seashore, and Devil's Tower National Monument, and then now here at Glacier. And Natural Resource Program Manager, basically I'm the ungulate biologist, so I study the wildlife with hooves, and then I supervise the other biologists that deal with the natural resources, like the fisheries biologist and the carnivore biologist, the revegetation specialist, and then all the staff underneath them. So I kind of oversee that program for the division chief, who oversees natural and cultural resources. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, what an enviable career. I mean, you've lived in some of the most beautiful places in the United States. So your background is a wildlife biologist, I assume?
Actually, animal science and animal nutrition is how I got my start. And I went to Yellowstone for one summer to do lead trail rides for the concessionaire for 6 months, and that turned into 12 years. So,
well, you're not only a dog owner, but an animal lover. It seems, if that's what you studied in school, animals are high on your list. It seems.
Definitely, yeah. We've always had pets growing up, from gerbils to canaries and guinea pigs and dogs and cats and everything. So it's always had something in the house to keep us busy.
So where did you grow up, Mark?
I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. And then after freshman year in high school, we moved to Michigan. And from there, then I went to Michigan State University. So all the green Sparties out there, go green. We beat the evil empire yesterday. It was great. And then I went to University of Illinois for my master's degree. So, and then, but basically I studied equine exercise physiology and nutrition. So race horses, nutrition for all the domestic species and stuff like that is what my background's in. So,
wow, I could use you here. Well, I know that your friend and dog trainer, Allie, is watching, Allie Marshall, who's been with us for some previous episodes. She's the canine instructor from Wind River Canine Partnership. We're delighted to have you, Allie. And I know that Mark has put together a presentation. Hi, Allie. Let's get her on here for us. Hello here, James.
I think I have audio now.
Yeah, you're there.
Yay!
Yeah, we were having a few technical issues getting people from 3 different parts of the state together, but James worked his magic. Thank you, James, very much. Well, I'm going to turn it back to Mark to start this story for us, and I know that you play a major role, Allie, in it. So once we've kind of heard Gracie's story, I'd love to have a conversation with both of you afterwards. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, Mark.
Okay. I hopefully remember how to get everything shared. We'll go here. All right. Can everybody see the screen?
You're good to go. Looks great.
All right.
Yeah.
So thank you for having us. I think this is amazing, and this kind of goes along with the education and outreach that we do as part of this program with Gracie. But everyone, this talk will be a little different than ones I've done in the past, where it's pretty science heavy and all the data behind why we do what we do. But for this one, I think we're just going to start with a statement that everybody says at some point in their life is, you know what, let's get a dog. And it started out, we moved to Glacier in 2010, and we had 2 dogs with us. And unfortunately, within a pretty close time period, they both passed away on us. And so we just had a 7-year-old and a kitten. And that wasn't enough mayhem in the house. So we decided we were going to look for a puppy. And my mother put us in contact with some friends of hers in Michigan whose border collie just had puppies. And the one you see here is Gracie in a basket as a little puppy. We did look at the whole litter, but we think with Gracie, we found one with the energy level that we liked. This is one of her favorite poses still. And she definitely has the cuteness factor that, you're always looking for. Everyone thinks their dog is the cutest one out there. So we got Gracie out here to Montana with us, and, basically, first and foremost, she's our pet. She started as a family pet, and she still is a family pet, but now she's got a cool job to do. She would go camping and hiking with us. You can see her here on Lake McDonald, kayaking with my daughter and I. She likes to hang out around the house with her frenemy, Bob the cat. They kind of have a tenuous association, but they get along. I think it's fun to watch them chase each other around the house. And of course, Gracie, celebrates everything with us, from birthdays to walks in the park to trips to the ice cream store where we can get her some special doggy ice cream. So, but at some point, everyone asks, well, where did this idea come from? What made you decide that you were going to do something more, where Gracie wasn't just a pet, where she was also a working dog? And that story goes back to around 2012 or 2013, when the park was experiencing, and still is experiencing, a significant increase in visitation. And one of the things we did with that is we went out to the public, and we went to our park employees and asked them, what were some of the concerns that you see with increasing visitation that you think we should address? And one topic that came up over and over again, not only from the public, but from the employees, was the topic of human-wildlife interactions, specifically with the goats and the bighorn sheep up at Logan Pass. One thing that we do to try and manage them, or what we were doing at the time, we were using techniques such as, to get this bighorn sheep that you can see on this slide to move out of the parking lot, we would fire cracker shells, which is basically a small firecracker that you shoot out of a shotgun, and it explodes between you and the animal, and the noise, in theory, pushes it out. Other techniques we used were rocks in a can, just shaking it and making a lot of noise, or some other noise maker to try and get it to move away. Sirens on a law enforcement vehicle, or, as this employee is demonstrating, shaking a plastic garbage bag at the animal to get them to move out. For a while, those techniques worked, but if you go to the well too many times, the well tends to dry up, and these techniques were losing their efficacy. And so we didn't know what to do. But one thing that we did do, we wanted to figure out why these animals were hanging out in such close proximity to people at Logan Pass. Anybody that's been to Logan Pass in the summertime, of course, that's the only time you can get to Logan Pass, has experienced the number of people, the vehicle traffic, and just the amount of chaos going on. But what we found from our study that we did up there is that the main reason that these sheep and goats hang out in such close proximity to all these people is that there's so many people that very few predators show up. So it creates a safe zone, a predator-free zone, if you will, for these prey species. And then on top of that, the sheep and goats get a unique source of minerals. They're very mineral driven because they have a mineral deficient diet. And with all the people up there hiking and not very many restrooms, people pee all over the place, and this provides minerals for the goats and the sheep. So, we figured out why they were hanging out up there, and that basically with all those people, we were changing their behavior, and we anticipate that visitation is going to keep going up. And so we were trying to find something to do to help manage this, because as I mentioned previously, the techniques we were using in the toolbox were kind of losing their efficiency out there. So, basically it came down to, do you want to be proactive or do you want to be reactive? And I admit the government's very good at being reactive, but for a change, I wanted to try and be proactive and try and get ahead of it or change the issue that we're seeing up there. So one of the first things that I did is I looked around at other places that were experiencing similar situations like us. And the first place I looked was our sister park in Canada, Waterton Lakes National Park, just across the border. And one thing that they were doing is they would contract with a company that had border collies to move habituated deer out of the town site of Waterton. And what was happening is these deer would come into town in the spring before they dropped their fawns. Again, there's a lot of people, a lot of traffic, a lot of mayhem. So the predators would avoid this area. The deer would have their fawns, and then the predators would realize that there's a new food source down there potentially. Fawns don't move very fast, and so then it would draw predators into the town site, which if you're walking around at night, you don't want to go down a dark alley and run into a grizzly bear. And the deer were also becoming very aggressive with people. People were getting kicked. Dogs were getting kicked and being chased, and it was just a bad scene. So they used these trained border collies. They would go around the town site and push them out of the town site, and they would have their fawns in the woods where they were supposed to. And then another place I looked at was a National Park Service unit in Washington, D.C., the National Mall. They have a company that they contract with called the Geese Police, and they have trained border collies that they use to keep geese out of the reflecting pool and off of the national lawn. For those of you that have been to D.C. and have had the privilege of checking this area out, I mean, it's America's front yard. People like to go and have picnics on the lawn, let their kids run around, and just enjoy themselves. But that's really hard to do when you have excessive amounts of goose poop that's all green and slimy all over the place. You don't want your kids playing in that. You don't want to sit down in it, and you sure don't want to, be playing softball or something and wind up with that all over you. So people were complaining, and then they had just finished a renovation of the reflecting pool that cost millions of dollars. They flipped the switch and turned it on, and within 3 days they had to shut it down because there's so much goose poop that it had fouled up, pardon the pun, fouled up the filtration system and jammed it. And so they had to shut it down. They had to drain the pool. They had to replace the filtration system. And they did that about 2 times before they decided they needed to do something. And so they contracted with this company, and that's been very successful. So I went to the FAA site and looked on there, and from the 30-year period, 19, just looking at mammals, there were over 5,000 incidents of mammal aircraft collisions. And when you factor in bird collisions with that, it goes up to over 230,000 collisions over that 30-year period. So it's definitely a concern. And one of the airports I looked at was the one in Traverse City, Michigan, where there was an employee up there who had a dog. Unfortunately, Piper passed away, but Piper was our inspiration. And as you can see, I mean, Piper in front of a Coast Guard helicopter wearing goggles. He was a bad dog. Anyways, they would use him, and he would go clear the runway. Planes could take off or land, and they saw a significant decrease in the number of collisions with whether it's mammals or birds. And the one thing different about this one was that, like I said, it is an employee-owned dog, so they didn't have to do a contract. And so that made it more cost effective. So, and then, I turned around, I looked in the mirror and saw that, back in the mid to late 90s, Glacier National Park actually used trained Karelian bear dogs to deal with habituated bears that were frequenting certain road corridors and certain trail corridors in the park. And they brought the dogs in, dog and team handlers, and they addressed the areas that we had concerns about. And it didn't take very long for the bears to move on and modify their behavior. And that was a very successful program. Again, that was another contract we had to do, so additional funds there would be needed. And as everybody knows, the funds are getting tighter in the private sector as well as the government sector. So I got to looking at those and I said, a lot of these places use border collies, and I happen to have one, and she's about 1.5 years old, and she can probably use a job because she's tired of herding our 7-year-old around the house, and our 7-year-old was getting tired of it at the time. So I went to my boss and I asked him, and he thought it was a different idea, but he was like, we'll give it a try. And so I took it to the park leadership team, and one of the first questions was, why try it here? Well, does it work? And I said, yes, just the examples I just gave you, shows that it's an effective tool. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the do all end all. It's not like you can forget everything else and just go with a dog. Because again, if you go to the well too many times, that well will dry up. So it provides us another tool in the toolbox. So they said, that sounds like a great idea. And I said, great. Can I have some money for funding? And unfortunately, they said, no, good luck finding that. So it took me about 1 year, and I finally wrote a proposal to the Glacier National Park Conservancy. This is our Parks Friends group and a fundraising organization that provides funds for projects in Glacier. And I wrote a proposal for this idea and ran it through the protocols that they had, and it went through the grants committee, and lo and behold, it got funded. There was one individual family that funded the whole thing, initial training and everything. So all this is being funded through private donations and not a lick of federal tax dollars other than my salary. But the way I look at it is I get paid whether I'm sitting in front of a computer or out trying to deal with human-wildlife interactions, and I'd rather out be doing something useful and trying to change that. So important to note. Because if it weren't for the Conservancy's funding on this project would not be getting off the ground. It would not be where it is right now. So while I was trying to get funding, I was also trying to find a trainer because it was kind of a unique skill set that I was trying to look for to have this dog learn. And so again, I went back to the Wind River Bear Institute, who is a known entity in the park. Several of the employees that were there, worked with them back in the mid to late 90s when they were in there. And I talked with them, and they put me in touch with Wind River Canine Partners. So we set up a meet and greet so that they could see if the dog had a good temperament for the potential training. And more importantly, I think, to see if I had a temperament. And luckily, we both passed. I think Gracie probably passed easier than I did. But we both got there. And had the funding, and so we set the training up. And one thing we wanted to do is figure out what was it going to look like at the end. We know where we are now, but what do we want this finished product to look like? And one of the things I learned from running this through the park protocols, to make sure everyone's answers or concerns were answered, was trying to describe this. And basically what wildlife shepherding is it's applied pressure. And by pressure, I don't mean physical touch, I mean presence. So humans and, animals too, all have like a bubble around them that they consider their security or their safety zone, their comfort bubble. And when somebody gets too close to you, what's your initial instinct? They might not even be touching you, but, if you don't like the looks of that person and they get within 3 feet, you start backing away or you start moving away. And so that's what I mean by applied pressure. We know from our research study that the reason the sheep and goats are hanging out up there is basically we've eliminated predators for the most part. I'm not saying completely, but for the most part from that area. And so I thought, reintroducing Gracie as a predator, would that work? And, because to us, she looks like a cute, fuzzy border collie that you want to go pet. But to them, we were hoping that she looked like a big, mean, fierce thing with rippy teeth and, something to be concerned about and move away from. So we developed the plan that, we want to do a slow, steady approach. It's not a rodeo. We don't just open up the door to the car and Gracie goes running out and there's people and sheep and goats and dogs running everywhere. It's a very controlled, very slow process to get them to move. And Gracie at no point at any time during any of these situations ever touches the wildlife. So she does it completely just by her presence. And if anyone's ever seen a border collie work, when they get focused on something, they kind of crouch down on their front feet and they kind of creep up and they have what's called the border collie stare that just bores holes through whatever animal they're looking at. And it's interesting to see that when we're working with that, because the sheep could be totally ignoring everything, and then Gracie comes out and starts focusing on them, and then before you know it, within a matter of minutes, all these animals are looking at Gracie saying, I don't like the way she's looking at me. So we also decided we wanted to collect data to document how successful these hazing events are and compare them to the traditional methods that I described earlier, because it would be nice to know, how efficient or, does this technique work? And so we do collect data. I have tons of data on the shepherding events that we do with Gracie. We're just trying to collect more data for the traditional events like this that you see this employee doing so that we can make a better comparison. But so far, it is showing that it's an extremely efficient technique, not only to get the wildlife to move out of a high visitation area, but then, as I'll get into a little later in the talk, it's also a very effective method to get messaging out and interact with the public. So again, to sum up, we wanted this project to be safe, not only for visitors and employees, and including Gracie, because you can consider it an employee, but we also wanted it to be safe for the wildlife. Again, not a silver bullet. It's just another tool in our toolbox. And one of the concerns was that, we were going to start doing this and the wildlife was going to run away for 5 miles and we're never going to see wildlife up there again. But that's not the case. What we're finding is that when we use Gracie to move the wildlife up there, they move maybe 45 to 70 yards away. They're not in the parking lot, and visitors can still view them in a natural setting in a safe manner. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it allows us to interact with the public and increase the awareness of habituated wildlife and why it's not a good idea for you or for them to approach them and try and get a selfie with your cell phone. So this is where it's going to get interesting. I am going to try and show a video here of Gracie training. So I believe I need to do a stop share, and I'm going to try and do another screen here. So hopefully I don't blow the whole show up. So hold on a second. And we will hopefully somewhere find what we're looking for. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. But you can see what we're doing here is with, hopefully you can see it, is working with domestic sheep, and we're practicing that slow approach where when the animals are moving, we're moving. And one thing that was interesting...
we are unable to see your screen. I think we've got to share a different window, perhaps.
Okay, hold on a second, and I will see what I can do there then. Okay, how about now? Is that working?
There we go. We got you. Right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So as you can see what we're doing here, we're walking slowly and steadily. We're applying pressure right here. We're approaching these animals. They're uncomfortable with us being there, so they're slowly moving away. They stop, we stop, and then they start moving, we start moving again. And so this is what we're working on, and basically Gracie and I working under the tutelage of Allie and Kelsey, learning how to work with each other, but also learning the voice commands that we use. And Allie at the end can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the interesting things with training Gracie is that the concept of pushing, because border collies are a breed that likes to go out and bring back to you. And we were trying to teach her to push, and she picked it up pretty quick though. And yeah, so that's that video. So I will stop share on that, and I will go back to the presentation if I can find it. All right, is the presentation back up?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to get a job in IT when I retire. There we go. All righty. Okay, so these are just pictures of the same thing in case the video didn't work. You can see Gracie, basically just by her presence, you can see she's got that border collie creep going on there, moving those sheep around. And it's not scrolling. There we go. Scrolling this way. And that's just another photo, so we can skip those. Okay. So the training process was about 12 weeks, and that was with Allie and her group really intensively training Gracie not only on the wildlife component of it, but also getting Gracie used to working in areas with lots of noise and crowds and people. And again, she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was probably the more challenging part of the training than teaching a border collie the art of herding, because that's pretty ingrained in them. But we were all trained up. We got back to the park, and the first night, we went up to Logan Pass. We were all excited, but we didn't know how it was going to translate from working domestic sheep, and you saw the size of them, to working bighorn sheep or mountain goats, which can, either one can weigh up to 285 or 300 pounds, and they have big, impressive, intimidating horns. And so we didn't know, how that was going to go down, but we got up there to the Logan Pass, and the first night we were there, we found these 6 bighorn sheep in the parking lot. And so what we did is we got a lay of the land and figured out which way we wanted to try and push them out of the parking lot. And then we got the people a safe distance back, explained what we were doing, and then we got them out, and they moved about 65 yards away. And this is the same group about 15 minutes later, right there. And it's kind of neat to point out, to people, especially photographers who like taking pictures. It's like, if you wanted a picture of a bighorn sheep, which would you prefer? The pavement in the vehicles or the sheep in their natural habitat doing what sheep do? It was pretty cool. This whole event took probably less than a minute and a half. And that's another thing we weren't sure about. We didn't know if it was going to be like, 45 minutes to try and get these animals out of here. But when we got Gracie up there and introduced her to these animals right away, I think the predator recognition clicked in. They didn't like the way Gracie was looking at them, and they moved away. And there's another video then coming up, and we'll show that hazing event here. So I will try and do this again. Practice makes perfect, right? And all right. And now, hold on, I gotta do it again. I think I had to open it. There we go. And all right, can you see that?
Yep.
All right. Try and start it again. Okay, so this is us approaching, and Gracie's pretty amped up. This was her first time doing anything, but you can see those sheep stopping and looking. You can see Gracie with her head down, focused on them, and the sheep say, "I don't want to be here." You can see them figuring out what they're going to do, and again, it's probably not the greatest on Gracie's part there, but she's learned a lot since then. Like I said, she was really amped up and excited to go. But you can see we got the sheep out of there, and it was over really quick. Just about 45 yards away, they were down there, and then the people could line up on that sidewalk, and they could enjoy the sheep in a safe distance then. So let's see, back to PowerPoint. All right. And so one thing important to note is that when we work at Logan Pass with Gracie, she is always on a leash. And that's partly for her safety, partly for people's safety, but mostly perception, because we don't allow dogs off leash in the national park. But it's a good education tool, again, for that and many other topics. But in the wintertime, we're having a lot of sightings in the middle of the day. 2 years in a row, I had a mountain lion walk right by my office window at 2 in the afternoon. And, took me a while because, like I said, I'm not as bright as my border collie, but I thought, oh, okay, there's about 24 deer hanging out in the wintertime in the housing area. And what are we going to do? So again, proactive or reactive, let's try and be proactive. And we thought, Gracie does not haze predators. She does not do any shepherding with bears or lions, but she's really good at moving sheep and deer. So we thought, let's move the Mountain Lions grocery store to outside the park housing area because we had families living there with small children and pets. And we did actually have in the middle of the night, a mountain lion come in and kill a deer right behind a family's house that had 3 young children in it. So we figure, again, we had to do something about that. And so I will try yet again. I'm just showing off now because I'm figuring all this stuff out. But I'll show an example of Gracie doing some of the hazing in the housing area. And let me try it again. All right. So hopefully, can you see the screen on that?
Good girl.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, leave it.
So I don't know if you can see my arrow, but just kind of in the upper right-hand quadrant in those trees is a deer. And one thing we're able to do in the park housing area in the wintertime, one, because there's hardly any traffic, but it's thickly wooded. So if we tried to do this on leash, Gracie and I would be wrapping each other up around trees the whole time. So we are able to use her off leash to get this done. But if you watch this deer that's kind of in the upper right-hand corner there, you'll be able to see it. Right now, you probably can't see it, but it's focused on Gracie, and Gracie is focused on it, and that deer wants to get away. So we'll roll tape here, and you can see the deer getting ready to move to the right.
Walk up. Walk up.
And then you can see her. She's out of the housing area. And what we try and do is we try and teach boundaries to the wildlife. So like at Logan Pass, there's the brick wall. And here at the housing area, there's this road. We want to teach them that on one side is a safe zone where you're not going to be bothered. But if you're on the wrong side of that, we're going to come bother you until you leave and go where we want you to. And so it's been kind of interesting working with Gracie. At first, she would look to me a lot for, guidance on what I wanted her to do and what she should do. And now, especially I think with the work we've been doing with the deer in the park headquarters area, I'll let this play here again. I just wanted to pause it while I mention this, but it's almost to the point now where, I'm just kind of along for the ride, making sure everything goes good and kind of watching the behavior of the animals and the dog to make sure everything looks okay. But at this point, Gracie has the deer out of the housing area, and you're going to see her when I get this started again. She's going to turn around and look at me and see what I want her to do, and then sometimes we might have her bump the animals further up the hill if they don't move far enough away, or I'll do a leave it command, which to her means that your job is done, come back to me, and you're going to get a cookie. So here we go.
Girl. Okay, leave it. Okay, leave it. Good girl. That girl. Good job.
And that's a happy dog right there. All right, so we're almost done. Can't remember if I had one more or not. Oh, I do have one more, yeah. So, like I said, I'm just showing off. So, my technical expertise. And we'll try this again. But one important thing that we do is we got to keep Gracie's skills sharp, and mine for that matter. And so what we do is Gracie's very ball driven.
Easy up.
And what we do when we go to the dog park or anywhere out there is I'll throw the ball and I'll have Gracie stand right next to me. And then I can give her the commands for left or right or easy up or a down. And, if I don't give her those and I throw the ball, she'll run after it like 90 miles an hour and go grab it. So this just shows the control that, we have together working with these commands. So I'll just let this play out here.
Good, Gracie down. Gracie, easy up. Gracie down. Okay, get that ball. Good girl.
There we go. So, yeah, she's very ball driven. And then usually at the end of every event that we do, the ball is her reward. So now, I know we're probably running short on time, Suzanne. If we are, just let me know and I can talk faster. But
oh, go ahead. People are very interested.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So again, why do we do it? I get this question a lot, not in a bad way, but it's like, why are you doing this, man? It's like, well, for one, it's effective. And two, and most importantly, which took a little bit to figure out because, again, we thought the job was going to be 90% shepherding wildlife and maybe 10% visitor contact. It's probably, in reality, 5% shepherding wildlife and 95% visitor education and outreach. Which, if you look at this photo right here of this individual using his cell phone to take a picture of two animals with basically knitting needles sticking out of their head, they're that sharp. What is the problem here? As a park service, as an agency, and other agencies do the same thing, we come up on something like this, and right away it's like, we need to move that wildlife. And we do. But that's not the problem. That's treating a symptom. The issue, we'll call it an issue, not a problem. The issue is people, but people don't like to hear that they're an issue or a problem. We could go out and we can hammer if there's a bear. We can, thumper rounds, cracker shells. We could make it sound like the 4th of July going on to get that bear to move. But that is not addressing the underlying issue, which is people. These goats aren't doing anything wrong. As a matter of fact, these goats are pretty smart because they figured out a place where there's so many people, there's not anything with big teeth that's going to eat them. So if you were a prey species, wouldn't you do the same thing? So I kind of got to thinking, it's like, okay, what can we do here to avoid a situation like this where this person's way too close using inadequate equipment to take a picture? We know that the wildlife can learn. We've learned that from the other places. When you use dogs or other techniques, they figure it out pretty quick. Wildlife are not stupid. But can the visitors learn? And so what can we do to try and get that education and outreach going? And, I spend a lot of time in the winter going to school groups, and in the summer, visiting service groups that come to the park, local community groups. Gracie and I go and we give presentations and talks on what we can do. One particular scenario sticks in my head when I was up at Logan Pass that made me think of this wildlife trading card project. There was about a 10-year-old boy up at Logan Pass, and I was watching him, and he flipped a potato chip out to the ground squirrels. And I hollered up at him. I said, "Hey, don't feed the wildlife." And he looked at me, and he flipped another one out there just as he was looking at me. So I got, all rangery and serious and notched my hat down, and I start marching up there, and I'm like, "Hey, don't feed the wildlife, blah, blah, blah." And his parents were there taking pictures of him doing it. So I get up to the kid and I start reading him the riot act, explaining him how it's bad for the wildlife, how it could be really bad for him. And if something happened to him, your parents would have to, and I pointed over to where his parents were, and they were no longer there. His parents abandoned him so he could get yelled at by a Park Service ranger. And I thought, I wish there was a way that could have ended better for that kid. And so I thought, trading cards. Who doesn't like trading cards? I still have all the cards I collected from when I was a kid for baseball and stuff. So I was like, let's try trading cards. So what I did is I came up with a set of 11 cards. And the first one just has this generic wildlife thing on there. For all animal species except for bears and wolves, you have to be 25 yards away. And you tell that to somebody, and they have no idea how far 25 yards is. But everyone knows how big a school bus is. So it's like you have to stay 2 school bus lengths, it's not hard, it's not easy to say, away from the wildlife. And if it's a bear or a wolf, you have to stay 8 buses away. And that kind of sticks in their head. You're starting to speak the language that these people understand. And so this is just another way to get that message out to people about not approaching wildlife. And so, I chose bighorn sheep, mountain goats, deer, black and grizzly bears, just common species that we see habituated to people in the park. And what we do is employees from other agencies in the park or other divisions in the park, like maintenance or interpretation or law enforcement, will carry some of these cards around in their pocket. And if they see people doing something correct, they'll walk up to that person and say, hey, that's a great job. Here's a card explaining wildlife safety. You got it. You're doing it good. But then if you see a situation that I was involved in with that young boy, then it's another kind of carrot and a stick. You can they can call him back and say, hey, don't do that. It's against the rules. You're putting animals' life at risk. And now here's a cool card. Don't let it happen again, and, learn from this. And so, it's got the safety message on there. Wildlife may not know better, but you do. I can't tell you how many times I would approach people that are too close to wildlife, and their response was, well, it walked up to me. To which I say, well, you have 2 legs and they appear to work. You can move yourself away to a safer distance. Do not let that animal get close to you because, again, it's putting you at risk and it's putting that animal at risk. So here's just an example. This is the mountain goat card. It's got the cool photo on there, and like a trading card, it's got the interesting facts about that species, and then it goes into why we don't want the wildlife in close proximity. And then, as you can see on the card here, not only does it have the Glacier National Park logo, but it has our friends, the Glacier National Park Conservancy, because, again, I wrote a proposal for this project, and it was 100% funded by the Glacier National Park Conservancy. So, again, this is not your tax dollars going to make, trading cards. This is private donations by private citizens that our group fundraised for. And, again, if they hadn't done this, we would not have this project or this ability to reach out and educate the public. This is just an example of the grizzly bear card then, again, with the cool facts and everything. And, of course, the set's not complete if you don't have a card of Gracie on there. And she's one of the more sought-after cards. As you look at that picture, you can tell why. Another thing that we do for education and outreach is Gracie does have her own Instagram account. So if you follow Instagram, her handle is Bark Ranger NPS, and I'll have the link up here in a second. But she has over 29,000 followers on her Instagram account from countries like Italy and Germany and England to Canada, Mexico, the U.S., all over. She's got an incredible following on there. But again, what that allows us to do then is not just post pretty pictures, but it allows us to preload information to people that might come to the park with the behaviors and the information that we want them to know when they get here, to try and avert, this any conflict before they happen. So that's pretty much my presentation. It's not complete without thanking people that helped you get here. And, the park leadership team was huge because, like Suzanne said earlier, they could have easily laughed me out of the room when I came up with this very different idea of what we can do to manage people and habituated wildlife. The Conservancy and the donors that made these projects possible, Wind River Bear Institute and the Wind River Canine Partners, the Park Service employees that take part of the card program, but also all the other stuff that goes on with this, and then Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, who didn't necessarily help with Gracie, but they did help us with the mountain goat captures that allowed us to get to the root of why the goats and sheep are hanging out at Logan Pass. So again, as with anything, it's a team effort. It's not just me, it's not just Gracie. And one bullet that I do not have on here is my wife and daughter. It's nice of them to allow me to use the family pet as a work tool. So they're all on board. They think it's great. And so we're trucking forward. And I will end it here. Right here is Gracie's Instagram handle if you're interested. And then if you do want to look up a little article that we did on the wildlife shepherding program and what it looks like, you can follow this link right here, and that will take you to more information. So with that, I will stop sharing. I will stop talking, and other people can say something. So thank you very much, Suzanne. I appreciate the opportunity. Allie, glad you're here. I'll give you all the hard questions, and I'm going to sit here and pet Gracie.
Well, everybody has so enjoyed this, Mark. First of all, you are a really engaging presenter. And I can see that you and Gracie must make a terrific team out at the parking lots. And somebody asked in our questions here is, if they see you in the parking lot, are they allowed to go up and pet Gracie? Is she's one of the wildlife that they can get up close and personal with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, education and outreach is part of her job. So as long as we are not actively involved in the shepherding of wildlife out of an area, part of her job is to get people to come up to us so that we can talk and they can get information about the program. So yes, if it was just me walking around, no one would want to talk to me. But because I have this little face, people come say hi. So
my next question goes to Allie. And it's a follow-up on a comment you made at the very beginning of your presentation, Mark. And that is you both were evaluated, both dog and trainer, to see if you were going to be a trainable pair. So I would like to talk to Allie about that. What exactly do you look for in a trainable pair? I mean, you've got a pair and they're not going to be split up. You're not going to say, oh yeah, Gracie's great, but Mark's got to stay at home.
Be kind, Allie. Be kind.
Oh, you are so easy, Mark. I will be very nice. So when we were considering this project, and this was a project that actually began with Carrie Hunt, who is the founder of the Winter Bear Institute. And at the time, I was one of her trainers for that program. And we've since continued to build and develop our program. But what we were looking for is we were looking for a dog that had the necessary drive and instinct to do the herding work. And most border collies do, to some extent or another. Now, that's not Gracie's only job. Like Mark was talking about, she also has to be a wildlife and education ambassador. So we needed a dog who was invested enough in her job to be able to do it, but not so obsessive about it that she tuned out the rest of the world. She also had to be able to be a polite member of society and be able to sit there and have conversations with people. Mark had to be able to have her sit there while he had conversations with people, and have her not be vibrating out of her skin with anxiety to go to sheep again. So we were looking for a dog that was kind of a middle of the road. We were looking for kind of that happy medium Goldilocks dog who could do both of these very different and very opposing jobs. And then we were also looking for Mark as a handler being somebody that could do both of those jobs as well. It's pretty difficult to multitask. You have to be able to be aware of your dog and be aware of the environment and be able to execute all of the herding and the wildlife shepherding commands, but also be able to sit there and have a conversation with people. And that for the handler, I mean, as Mark's coming to find out, is almost as difficult as it is for the dog. So we were looking for a pair of human and dog pair that could work together and still do the individual tasks that we needed to train them for.
Well, one of the videos that you showed, Mark, indicated that this is an ongoing process, that the training aspects of this are never really over, that you have to keep yourself tuned up and keep Gracie tuned up by a sort of controlled training environments. Is that true?
Yeah, that's very true. We actually need to work with Allie to get a refresher trainer set up for this spring. Because I mean, it's, we get rusty. I admit that I've started taking shortcuts, and border collies are smart. If there's a shorter, easier way to do something, they're going to try and do that. That might not be the way you want them to. And so it's definitely ongoing, and that's what we try and do with her tennis ball, is to try and keep those skills sharp until we can get her back to Allie and she can fix everything.
So one of the other questions that I had, and this I'm going to direct to Allie, and that is that the predator stare. that the sheepdogs have is very, very effective on prey animals. But as Mark pointed out, he's not using Gracie to move grizzly bears or black bears or cougars or any, or I would assume foxes and coyotes for that matter, out of an area. Which brings me to the Karelian bear dogs. This question had never really occurred to me before this presentation, Mark, but the Karelian bear dogs do go out after bears. And how does that work? I mean, the Karelian bear dog is a different breed, but still, they are a predator. Predators have their eyes forward. Prey have their eyes on the side, and they're kind of tuned into what a predator looks like, and when they're really focused on you as a potential prey animal. But when you have predator on predator, could you address that, Ellie? I'm really interested in different training techniques for prey versus predators.
Sure. And I'm not going to go too in depth for it because that would be a question for like our field handlers. But at the core of it, Karelian bear dogs are traditionally bred to hunt large game like bear and moose and some of these other, especially over in Finland and Europe. And they're traditionally used to hunt bears, but they have a really unique hunting style in that they are typically hunted in pairs. So other types of bear and large game hunting hounds, like lion hounds and that kind of thing, they typically chase an animal until it goes up a tree. When the Wind River Bear Institute was considering the breed that would be best suited for this wildlife conservation effort, part of the actions that were sometimes taken were tranquilizing the bear to relocate it to a safer location. And when you do that, when an animal's in a tree, it risks injury. So the Karelian bear dogs were really unique in that when they corner their quarry, when they're traditionally hunted, they actually act a little bit more like Gracie or other types of herding dogs in that they almost head and heel the animal, kind of like a pair of herding dogs would, and keep them in a single location and wait for the hunter to catch up. So for the wildlife effort, this was really nice because these dogs could hold the bear at bay until the wildlife officer caught up, and then they could safely tranquilize the bear or do whatever they needed to do. And then beyond that, the training between them and Gracie is really similar. We're using these natural instincts that the dogs already have bred into them, either for herding or hunting, and we're putting that in a really controlled situation just with really solid obedience. These dogs, the Karelian bear dogs and Gracie and other types of animals used for this work, they have to be able to work with and trust their handler. And all we're doing is taking the instinct and we're making sure that we can control it and call the dogs off when we need to so that nobody gets hurt.
Fascinating. I'm going to ask you now, Mark. It seems to me that you have shown Gracie to be quite successful in National Park. So what is this going to lead to in terms of a long-term program? Have your higher-ups really kind of glommed onto this and recognized the value of it? And I also would love to have you address your card concept. What a great idea. And I can't help but believe that it's just a wonderful way to introduce the whole safety program. You know, it's a non-aggressive, very friendly way to get people engaged in that conversation. So what about those two programs? Are they sparking the higher-ups to want to support them?
Yeah, so, currently with the, park superintendent and other staff that we have, they're very supportive of the program. I think, with the training that we've got and the way that we've been running it and our social media, it's been very responsible. And, we've actually had the Conservancy come to us and say, look, we want to, there's interest out there. We want, people want to fund another bark ranger. And the challenge is kind of like what Allie, mentioned earlier, is that, it's nice to have the team that's always together. And kind of like what I mentioned earlier is, this isn't my only job. I got all the other supervisory stuff to do. So, hopefully in the summertime, if I'm lucky, I get up to Logan Pass one night a week. So part of the challenge in expanding the program isn't the funding so much, because I think if we had a candidate, the Conservancy would be able to fund that. the challenge is getting the right individual that has a dog, that both have the right temperament, that also has a very understanding supervisor that would allow them to go out and do something that's not even in their job description at least one day a week or something like that. So that's probably more of the challenge than anything. Yeah. And then what was the second part there about the trading cards?
Yeah, the trading cards. It seems to me that again is something that the Park Service might want to pick up on. It was started by you in the Conservancy, but then it seems effective.
Yeah, so I actually, I reached out to some of the park staff that have worked in other parks, and one of them worked up at Brooks River up in Alaska, and there used to be a trading card program up there, he said. And then several other national parks or other wildlife agencies did it. And so I kind of got the idea, for the format from there. And then with a lot of help from my wife, who's a writer, editor, got everything organized and looking good. And got it. But it's a great way. It's also a very popular part of the program. We have people going around, asking rangers, hey, do you have a card? And again, that's a great opportunity for that individual then to interact with a park ranger, get information about wildlife, and just try and, get the messaging out there.
So we had one of our viewers today chime in that they are a big fan of her Instagram page. Clearly, they probably found out about this presentation. I don't know if you put anything out on Instagram.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got some of their fans here today. And I wanted to ask, in the national park in Washington, D.C., you used a contractor, is what you indicated. So is that a possible solution if finding the right pair of a park employee and a dog handler, is there room for a contractor to kind of provide these kind of services in a broader context? And I'd like to hear from both of you, from Mark and from Allie.
Yeah, so from a park perspective, I think it's totally doable. All you need is the money. And that's the challenge right there, is getting the funding. Gracie's going. She's done with her 5 minutes of fame. But the funding is the challenging part. But, we did have a program. We got some funding. Can't remember from where. Might have been the Conservancy also. But to bring in dogs that sniffed aquatic invasive species on boats. Yeah. It was probably for 2 years, and we're done with that now because we don't have the funding. But if, that would be the limiting factor right there. So. Yeah.
But do you know of anybody who does these kinds of contracts, Allie? Are you in contact with a group like the ones in D.C. that, basically provide technical canine support?
Contract with dogs?
Other than the Wind River Bear Institute and what the organization Mark was talking about, Working Dogs for Conservation, they both do that kind of work, although I don't know of any that do, other than maybe the Border Collies up in Waterton. And, border issues being what they are at the moment, I don't know that that's a real possibility. Nothing locally. It would be, and I think the other thing that you would have to consider with an organization like that, and that's something that we've dealt with and the Bear Institute dealt with, is if you are going to be contracting things like liability insurance, working with wildlife within the park. So I think Mark and Gracie's situation is probably the best case scenario from a financial standpoint, from a safety standpoint, but a contracting option could certainly work. It would just have to be the right people.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's so much possibility here. I mean, I really see the advantage. And I used to live in Alaska, so I'm well aware of the Brooks Camp situation. And I'm also well aware that, we had a one plane come down at one of the military bases because of geese on the runway, and they ended up using dogs. They tried all kinds of other things, and dogs were by far the most effective. Keeping geese from the runway. So there's clearly a real place for dogs in natural resource conservation, and whatever we can do to support that, we'd really like to do. It's clear that it can be very effective. So I want to thank you just greatly. Allie, thank you for introducing me to Mark. Mark, you've just done an outstanding job with Gracie, and it just seems it's a made-to-order situation for Glacier National Park. And thank you both for joining us today. And with that, if I don't have any other questions from our viewers, and we've had a really good audience today, Mark. People are really engaged and excited about the topic. I want to thank you both, and thank you, James, for helping us with all the technology. And with that, we'll sign off.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.